Hello. So, November of 2020, day after Election Day, the local newspaper had a political cartoon. Guys watching television. Television's got a little banner about the pandemic, and the guy's making some comment to the effect of, I thought this was supposed to go away with the election. And the point being, people were saying that the pandemic was being used for political purposes, which I've said several times, and I still say it. And so the writer of the cartoon had political purposes being narrowed down solely to the election, which was wrong. Um, so I could go into a deep delve onto every person who's commented on the pandemic and their political affiliations and how they might have been trying to manipulate it for political purposes. I'm not a political expert, so I'm not going to do that, but I am going to look at Donald Trump. Now, this is going to be his response to the pandemic, the media's response to his response to the pandemic, just sort of an overview of how politics was used. He's a good good example of how the pandemic was used politically, both his actions and the actions of people opposing him, and their responses to his actions. Let's say. So to start with, okay. Now I'll come out and say right away. I like Trump as a president. I think he's going to be president again, which is a good thing in my opinion. Um, that said, all of his failures weren't failures so much as the fact that he wasn't allowed to succeed. By which I mean, no plan of man is 100% perfect, right? We come up with a good idea, but it's only 95% good and 5% bad or whatever. So most of Trump's ideas, in my opinion, were at least 85% good or better. 85 to 90% good, let's say. However, he would do something, go out publicly, do something, whatever, and the media would focus on the 10 to 15% bad stuff. And act like that was the only part of his proposal. I have said in the past, if Trump had ended the national debt by spinning straw into gold, the headlines the next day would read, but now what will the horses eat? He's not allowed to succeed, no matter how brilliant a plan may be. And again, when I say brilliant, I'm not saying the guy was a genius. He was just better than people gave him credit for. So I'm exaggerating. The same way other people exaggerated his negatives, I'm exaggerating his positives. I'll admit that. Now then, pandemic starts. Trump does what he can because, let's face it, the president's not a microbiologist, and that's true of all presidents we've ever had. We may someday elect a scientist as president, but until then, no president would have done any better than Trump so far as hands-on work with the pandemic. He left it up to the pharmaceutical companies to manufacture vaccines. One thing he did wrong was he fast-tracked them on it. FDA has certain procedures, policies, but there is legal to fast track past those in two certain conditions. First, it's got to be an immediate medical problem, which, or emergency, let's call it, which some people say, yes, the pandemic was, and I will partially agree to that. The other one is there has to be no alternative solution to it. Now, we got this stuff, never heard it pronounced, so I'm going to say this wrong, invectamin, or something like that. It's used in horses to treat parasites. So that was the first thing. People started using this Invectamin, claimed to have positive results, and the criticism was, but that's horse medicine. Okay, well, Botox, when that first started being used, people were saying that's used in nerve gas, which it is. Now it's being used to treat migraines. Warfarin, used as a blood thinner, is also used in rat poison. So saying that's a horse medicine for something that we're going to later turn around and use as a medicine doesn't seem like such an argument, such a good argument at least. It is an argument, it's just a bad one. Now, there are potential side effects to Invectamin, or however it's pronounced. Again, never heard it said, so I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly or not. But there are also negative things to the so-called vaccine for COVID. And we can argue which is worse or which is best. Now, it's interesting. I looked up the side effects of Invectamin, and every article on it came out after the vaccines were made. And so people were criticizing it before the vaccines were made. Don't take this, it's a horse medicine. But they didn't have, don't take it because of these side effects. They were just criticizing it. So we did have a treatment. People were using it. People said they were having positive results from using it against COVID. And therefore, we should not have been able to fast track the vaccine productions through the FDA. If we had gone back, studied Invectamin, and said, no, 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 this is bad because of these side effects, then we would be able to go back and fast track the vaccines. But we can't. So, like I said, all the articles I could find listing side effects for Invectamin came from after the vaccine was made. So someone did it after the fact. In the meantime, anyone questioning the vaccine side effects, which people have been doing for a while now, are treated as anti-vaxxers and evil and, spreading disinformation, even though there have been legitimate reports done. So, Trump fast-tracked the vaccine productions, which was bad. Now, interesting fact here is you will often hear people say Trumper and anti-vaxxer in the same sentence as if they're synonymous. They aren't. Most of the people who have been criticizing the vaccines are pro-Trump. But we don't think he's perfect. When people say you're just a Trumper, they're acting like we're following him blindly. When in reality, the people who have been supporting the vaccines and accepting anything said by the government as being positive about the pandemic, or all their procedures are good and just and perfect for everyone, they've been blindly following more than the anti-vaxxers are blind followers of Trump. Again, spring of 2021, after the vaccines were being distributed, Trump came out and said, endorsed them. He encouraged people to get a vaccine. If you are blindly following Trump, you would not be anti-vax. The two are not synonymous. Now, Trump, of course, supported them because they were made during his administration. He didn't make them. Like I said, people question, why isn't Trump doing more for this? Now, CNN took like a 10-minute segment to criticize Trump playing golf when there's a pandemic going on. Why is he not doing more for the pandemic? And the answer is there are limits to what the president can do. Now, any president basically, for any problem, they assign tasks to their cabinet, the proper cabinet department, wait for them to get back with results, look at the results, come up with a new plan, make more assignments to the cabinet, and there's a cycle going on. So there are gaps in what the president can actually do. Now, Trump played golf for 2 days because he did all he could. Biden spent a lot of time at the beach last year, and only the quote unquote alt-right press said anything about it. The same people who were, well, why is Trump playing golf? Said nothing about Biden spending time at the beach. Now, same thing. Biden answered all his questions about the border and the economy he could. He assigned his cabinet to do their thing, and he took a day off. To be fair, if you're not going to criticize Trump for playing golf, you can't criticize Biden for spending time at the beach, and vice versa. And that's the bit that I want to really hammer back is people were playing politics with this. Oh, our man's in the office. We're not going to question him spending time at the beach. Their man's in office. We're going to question him playing golf. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. At least not legitimately. Not if you want to be taken seriously. You got to treat everyone the same. Obama, look at pictures of Obama when he entered into office and then pictures of him 8 years later. The guy looked like he aged 20 years because the president is a stressful time. It's a stressful job being president. So any time the president takes off to recuperate, large emergency, sure, you should cut your vacation short and come and do something. But ongoing crisis, you've done all you can, you got a few days, take time off, not going to criticize them. And I say that for any president, Democrat or Republican, whereas the mainstream media only says it, for Democrats. Republicans are expected to be on call 24-hour a day. Again, major emergencies, everyone should be on call 24 hours a day. But for ongoing situations, there's a limit to what you can do. Take the time off when you can get it. Now then, we had some payments come out. People were asked to stop going to work. So we're going to get financial assistance from the government. Trump sent out checks. Biden sent out checks twice. Now, when Biden did it, the alt-right groups came out and said, this is bad for the economy, what are you doing? They didn't criticize Trump when he did it. Nobody criticized Trump because the left, they criticized Trump because his name went on the checks. And so, it looks like he's trying to make it look like he's giving this money from his personal account or something like that was the argument I heard some people making. Interesting thing is, everyone crashed their checks. I never heard of one person saying, well, this is bad for the economy, so I'm not going to cash my check. So to some extent, when the checks first came out, it made sense. Standard thought was, less contact with other people, we're less likely to spread this, and we're going to get it, it's going to go down faster. And if we want people to stop going to work, then we got to compensate them for the salaries they're making. And so that's justification given for it. Biden came out, did the same thing, and again, about a year had passed, 8 months to a year since the first set of checks went out. We were nowhere near closing, reopening the country. Sure, can't criticize him any more than we did Trump, although people did want to criticize Trump more than did Biden, but again, that's just the politics of the situation. By the time the third check came out, everyone was tired of the pandemic. Things were going nowhere. Why not just open things up? Because apparently, other countries were starting to open things up. So why not let's get back to normal instead of the government paying people to not work? Let people work again, and we'll just take our chances. We have this so-called vaccine, so why are we giving more money out? Um, so people were tired of it. More people criticized the third check than criticized the other ones. Everyone still cashed them, but there was actually a more legitimate reason for the media to come out and criticize the third check. None of them did, except for, again, the alt-right media, or the media labeled as alt-right. They're as mainstream as the other mainstream, or they are less extreme or as extreme as the other mainstream, or however you want to phrase that. But again, we got different person in office. What are we going to do? We're going to judge them differently, even though it's pretty much the same thing going on. Or, like I said, in the case of the third check, some people would say a worse thing going on because we should have been opening things up instead of creating more money. Now then, I had mentioned in an earlier video, a lot of people were small fish before the pandemic and then became big fish after the pandemic. Got put in position where their names became famous. Anthony Fauci is the big one on this, I think. No one heard of him before the pandemic, and suddenly he became world famous. Now, a lot of people criticize Fauci as he deserves criticism because he did a lot of stuff poorly. Trump came out a few months ago and said that Fauci played a small role in his whole pandemic response. Trump is the one who put Fauci in power. And interestingly enough, it was only the people who support Trump are the only ones who came out. The alt-right press is the only one that came out and said, wait a second, every time you had a press release regarding the pandemic, Fauci was standing right behind you. He looked like he played a bigger part in it than you're saying you did. The far left press or the mainstream press didn't say anything because to them Fauci's still a hero. And if we criticize Fauci, if we criticize Trump putting Fauci in office, then we're criticizing our hero. Can't do that. So they just ignored the whole story. So again, it was Trumpers, people who supposedly blindly follow Trump, who turned around and said, wait a second, you're lying to us. But again, the mainstream press doesn't want to say this because politics. Now then, a lot of people who were against Trump said they would never take any vaccine that was developed under his presidency. Turned around, he developed the pharmaceutical companies developed a vaccine, or what they call a vaccine. Again, I don't think it's a vaccine, and I'm going to hammer away at that continuously until someone tells me, give me proof that it actually prevents someone from catching the virus, as opposed to it just lessens the symptoms of it. I pointed out before, we changed the definition of vaccine in order to make this thing count as a vaccine. And that's not me being anti-vax, that's me going by the old definition. This is the definition I learned when I grew up of what a vaccine is, and what we are calling vaccines don't fit it. Trump calls it a vaccine because Trump's, again, it was made during his administration. He's claiming credit for it. He's endorsed it, but no one wants to admit he endorsed it. Otherwise, you have to stop calling Trumpers anti-vaxxers or anti-vaxxers Trumpers. You got to admit that his supporters actually think for themselves sometimes. But so everyone's saying we won't take anything that was used during Trump's or that was created during Trump's administration. So Biden, in order to get people to take it, claimed that it was made during his administration. People very quickly said, wait a second, no, we saw the, there were press releases, this stuff was out before your administration. And so then he turned around and said, well, it wasn't ready to be distributed, which, why did Trump create this stuff and then not distribute it? And the answer to that was it was in production. It was the so-called vaccines were fine, or they were approved like November or December of 2020. They were in manufacture after that, and they weren't ready to be distributed until after Biden took office. So it's not that Trump was against them being distributed or that he was preventing them from being distributed. It's that the process just wasn't ready at that time. We can argue about when the vaccines were made. We can't argue about the rest of the process. But so that became the official, and no one wants to really question that so much, or a few people questioned it because now, okay, so Biden now has credit for it by some people. We can now start handing them out, and the people who were afraid they would get a vaccine created by Trump now believe they're getting a vaccine created by Biden. It's all good because it's all politics. It's the same vaccine, but now the people endorsing it, the people pushing for it, are the same people who said they would never push for it in the previous administration. Because politics. Now, the one good thing that Trump did, 100% right, I would say, was he left it up to the states to decide their policies on how we're going to handle the pandemic. Because that's what the Constitution says to do. Nowhere in the Constitution does it give the federal government authority over people's health or health crisis, even. 10th Amendment, anything that the Constitution doesn't give to the federal government goes to the state governments. And so the states did things differently, and it allowed people like me to make videos and to say, look, let's compare what happened between these two states. They had completely different responses. They had the same results, So the people with the extreme responses, they were just going overboard. They didn't cut things down any better than the people who took no response or with less extreme responses. And so that is the one good thing Trump did, was he left it up to the states to do what the states were supposed to do. And so that's it. Like I said, I'm not praising Trump's response to the pandemic. I'm not condemning his response. I'm just saying his is a good example of the politics that was played around the pandemic. And that's all. Have a nice day.